In this episode, we start with risk identification and assessment, which is the habit of asking what could go wrong before something goes wrong. Security is not only about reacting to attacks, fixing alerts, or buying stronger tools. It is also about understanding what the organization has, what could threaten it, where weaknesses may exist, and what the business impact could be if those weaknesses turn into real problems. When you are new to cybersecurity, risk can sound like a vague business word, but it becomes much clearer when you connect it to actual assets and actual decisions. A risk assessment helps people decide what deserves attention first. It gives leaders and security teams a way to compare concerns instead of treating every issue as equally urgent. That is why assets, stakeholders, scoring, and categorization matter so much. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at CyberAuthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Risk identification begins with noticing that an organization cannot protect everything equally if it does not know what everything is. An asset is anything that has value to the organization and could be harmed, misused, lost, stolen, interrupted, or exposed. Some assets are obvious, such as laptops, servers, cloud systems, network equipment, databases, buildings, and mobile devices. Other assets are less visible, such as customer records, business processes, source code, employee knowledge, brand reputation, contracts, and the trust customers place in the organization. If you only think of assets as physical objects, you miss much of what security is meant to protect. A payroll system is an asset because people depend on it. A customer database is an asset because it contains information the organization must protect. A business process can be an asset because the organization may fail if that process stops. Once assets are identified, the next question is what could happen to them. Risk is usually connected to a threat, a vulnerability, and an impact. A threat is something that could cause harm, such as a criminal actor, a careless mistake, a system failure, a fire, a lost device, or a malicious insider. A vulnerability is a weakness that could be exploited or triggered, such as missing updates, weak access control, poor training, exposed data, or a fragile process. Impact is the harm that could result if the threat and vulnerability come together. A laptop with no sensitive data has a different risk than a laptop holding unencrypted customer records. A public website outage may be annoying for one organization and devastating for another. Risk identification helps you connect those pieces so that security work is tied to real consequences. Asset ownership is a major part of risk assessment because security teams usually do not own every asset they help protect. A system may be technically supported by an information technology team, but the business owner may be a finance department, operations group, clinical service, legal department, or product team. The owner understands why the asset matters, what it supports, and what level of disruption the organization can tolerate. Without ownership, risk decisions become messy. A security analyst may identify a serious issue, but someone with authority must decide how the risk will be handled, funded, prioritized, or accepted. Ownership also helps with accountability. If nobody owns a system, nobody feels responsible for patching it, reviewing access, approving changes, or deciding whether it should still exist. Unowned assets often become hidden risks because they fall between teams. Stakeholders are the people or groups affected by a risk or involved in managing it. Stakeholders can include business owners, system administrators, security staff, executives, legal counsel, privacy personnel, compliance teams, vendors, customers, and sometimes regulators. A risk assessment improves when the right stakeholders are involved because different people see different kinds of harm. A technical team may focus on system availability and configuration. A privacy team may focus on personal information and notification duties. A business owner may focus on revenue, service delivery, or customer obligations. Legal counsel may focus on contracts and regulatory exposure. If you leave out stakeholders, you may score the risk poorly because you do not understand the full impact. Security decisions are rarely just technical. They often affect money, operations, trust, safety, and legal responsibility at the same time. A practical risk assessment usually needs a way to collect information consistently. That information may come from asset inventories, interviews, questionnaires, vulnerability scans, architecture reviews, incident history, vendor reports, audit findings, system documentation, and business process discussions. The goal is not to create paperwork for its own sake. The goal is to build a reliable picture of what exists and what could go wrong. If an organization does not have a good asset inventory, risk assessment becomes harder because unknown assets cannot be evaluated. If it does not understand data flows, it may not know where sensitive information travels or where exposure could happen. If it does not know which systems support critical business functions, it may waste attention on low-impact systems while serious dependencies remain weak. Good information makes risk decisions less random. Risk scoring helps people compare risks in a consistent way. A common approach is to consider likelihood and impact. Likelihood asks how probable it is that the risk could happen. Impact asks how harmful it would be if it did happen. You may see ratings such as low, medium, and high, or you may see numeric scales such as 1 through 5. The exact scale is less important than consistent use. A risk with low likelihood and low impact may not need immediate attention. A risk with high likelihood and high impact deserves much more urgency. A risk with low likelihood but very high impact still needs careful thought, especially if the result could be severe. Scoring does not predict the future perfectly. It gives people a shared language for deciding which risks need attention first. Risk scoring can go wrong when people treat the score as more precise than it really is. A high score should not become magic, and a low score should not become an excuse to ignore reality. Scores depend on the information available, the experience of the people assessing the risk, and the assumptions used during the assessment. Two teams may score the same risk differently if they understand the business impact differently. That is why documentation matters. A score should usually come with a short explanation of why the risk was rated that way. The explanation helps later reviewers understand the reasoning. It also helps when conditions change. If a system becomes internet-facing, if sensitive data is added, if an exploit becomes common, or if a business process becomes more critical, the risk score may need to change. Categorization helps organize risks so the organization can see patterns instead of isolated problems. Risks may be categorized by asset type, business function, data sensitivity, threat source, vulnerability type, location, department, compliance area, or potential impact. For example, some risks may relate to identity and access, while others relate to cloud configuration, vendor dependence, physical security, data protection, or operational resilience. Categorization helps leaders understand where risk is concentrated. If many high risks involve outdated systems, the organization may need a modernization effort. If many risks involve privileged accounts, identity governance may need attention. If many risks involve vendors, third-party risk management may need stronger review. Categorization also helps reporting. A long list of individual risks can be overwhelming, but categories help show what the list means. Data sensitivity is one of the most important categorization factors because not all data creates the same level of exposure. Public marketing information is not handled the same way as employee records, customer financial information, health information, trade secrets, credentials, or legal documents. Personally identifiable information, PII, deserves special attention because it can be connected to a person and may create privacy, legal, and reputational harm if exposed. A system that stores low-sensitivity data may still matter for availability, but a system that stores sensitive data may carry additional confidentiality and compliance concerns. When you assess risk, you need to consider what the asset contains, not only what the asset does. A small database can represent a large risk if the information inside it is sensitive, regulated, or difficult to replace. Risk assessment also supports decision-making by helping people choose what to do next. An organization may decide to mitigate a risk by reducing the likelihood or impact. It may transfer some risk through insurance or contracts. It may avoid risk by stopping an activity. It may accept risk when the cost of fixing it is higher than the likely harm, or when the risk is within the organization's tolerance. Those treatment decisions are covered more deeply in another topic, but they depend on good identification and assessment. If the risk is poorly described, the decision will be weak. Leaders cannot make informed choices if they do not know which asset is affected, who owns it, what could happen, how likely it is, how severe the impact could be, and what assumptions were used. For a brand new security professional, one of the most helpful habits is learning to ask clear risk questions. What asset are you worried about? Who owns it? What business process depends on it? What data does it store, process, or transmit? What threat could affect it? What weakness makes that threat more realistic? What would happen if confidentiality, integrity, or availability were harmed? Who needs to be involved in the decision? How urgent is the risk compared with other risks the organization already knows about? These questions keep the conversation grounded. They also help you avoid jumping straight to a tool or control before you understand the problem. Good security work is not only about knowing possible solutions. It is about understanding the risk well enough to choose the right solution. Another useful habit is recognizing that risk assessment is not a one-time event. Risks change as technology changes, business priorities change, threats change, and people change. A system that was low risk when it was internal may become higher risk when it is connected to a partner or exposed through a cloud service. A process that was minor last year may become critical after the organization grows. A vulnerability that seemed theoretical may become urgent when attackers start using it widely. New regulations, mergers, new vendors, remote work, and new data uses can all change the risk picture. That is why assessments need review and maintenance. The goal is not to freeze the organization in place. The goal is to keep risk understanding current enough that decisions are based on reality. The main idea to carry forward is that risk identification and assessment helps security work become focused, explainable, and connected to business value. You identify assets so you know what needs protection. You involve stakeholders so you understand impact from more than one angle. You clarify ownership so someone has responsibility for decisions. You examine threats, vulnerabilities, and consequences so the risk is more than a vague concern. You score risks so they can be compared, and you categorize them so patterns become visible. For Security Plus SY0801, do not treat risk assessment as a paperwork exercise. Treat it as the process that helps an organization decide what matters most, what could go wrong, who needs to care, and where limited security time and money should go first.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.